Welcome to this video. In this video you will learn the most important things about the SAP GUI, what the SAP GUI is, what you need for it, and what tricks there are in dealing with the SAP GUI are described in more detail. Enjoy this video and let's get started.
SAP ECC is based on a client-server architecture. The client here mainly represents the SAP GUI as a user interface or software for data display and input. The server, on the other hand, provides the services and functions of SAP ECC. This is where the actual processing takes place and stores the data in a database. In addition to the client-server architecture, SAP ECC uses a three-tier architecture. The client-server architecture and thus SAP ECC is in turn divided into the following three layers: presentation layer, application layer, and persistence layer. The presentation layer forms the interface to the SAP users. Essentially, this interface is carried out with the so-called SAP GUI of the local computer. The graphical user interface is used to enter data and influence the business process. In the application layer, the applications, our programs are executed. This is where the actual processing and logic of the business's processes takes place. This layer consists of several application servers. Usually, one server is provided for each SAP module. There are also services for distributing requests and coordinating the application servers. In the persistence layer, the relational database management system stores the data in a database. All common database systems are supported. Not only the master and transaction data are stored in the database, but also the applications with associated SAP repository objects themselves. Keep in mind, if you're using SAP S/4HANA, then you can only use the SAP HANA database. In connection with SAP GUI, you often hear the term SAP Logon. On the right hand side, we are seeing the so-called SAP GUI, and in the left side here, we're seeing the SAP Logon. And the SAP Logon is the program that is installed on your local computer. With the SAP Logon, you can log on to the SAP server and work with the SAP GUI. We can see it directly here on the screen. Basically, the SAP GUI is based on the SAP Logon. The SAP Logon, as seen in here, stores the connection data to the SAP server. And as the name suggests, SAP users log on to the SAP server via this program. So once you've double-clicked on the SAP Logon, then this screen will open up, and in here you can double-click on one connection and then log in to your SAP system. And often the two terms SAP GUI and SAP Logon are used in the same way, but they are technically not the same. There are different versions of SAP Logon depending on the program version. Some functions are possible or not in the SAP GUI. The abbreviation GUI stands for Graphical User Interface. And with the SAP GUI, you can work with the SAP system, type in your inputs, and work with the processes. So here we are right now in the ABAP program execution and the transaction code SA38. And here I use basically the SAP GUI based on the program SAP Logon. And here we can see different parts directly in the screen. In the top left area, there we see the menu bar. Within the menu bar, with your left mouse button, there you can click on one of those functions and then you can open up new functions. And as mentioned, with click, you can execute this function, or as we see right here, you can also and every time use the key combination as shown. If you want to, you can also left click in the top left corner, and there you have special functions. In the top right corner, there we have also some functions to minimize, to restore, or to exit this special window within the SAP GUI. Below the menu bar there we can see the toolbar, and starting with the so-called command field. In the command field there you can type in transaction codes to start transactions really fast and easily without searching the transaction in a specific area menu, in the SAP Easy Access menu, or maybe via your favorites. So this is really useful and in my opinion one of the most important input fields in the whole SAP GUI. Then we are seeing another quite useful buttons and functions in the toolbar, for example, to go one step back, to exit this transaction, to cancel this transaction, maybe to open a new GUI window, to create a SAP GUI shortcut, to open the SAP GUI options or other functions down here. And here, based on the transaction you're currently using, here we are seeing the application toolbar. So now we're seeing different functions based on this transaction, the other program execution. If I would, for example, move to another transaction, so for example, to the data browser, then we can see different buttons. So jumping one step back to the other program execution, and in general, all here, there we can see the so-called Dynpro. So the Dynpro is an area where basically all the buttons, input fields, titles, and so on are shown. So basically here in the other program execution, we're just seeing one input field for entering the program that should be executed. But as seen, if we move over to the data browser, there we can see a different Dynpro based on selection criteria. So for example, if we would type in a different table, then we can see different selection criteria. Then down here we can see the so-called status bar. So in the bottom left area there we can see some messages. So for example, success messages, warnings, or error messages. And in the bottom right area there we can see the system information. So currently it's not shown, but if I click on this triangle, then I can open the system information, and then we can see the system information. And for example, if I click on this dark triangle, then I can see different information. And if I would click on one of those information, then this will be shown later on. So for example, now I can show the user down here. If I would like to close the system information, then I click once again to this triangle, and then it's not shown anymore. Within the SAP GUI, you have basically three common possibilities to execute transactions in SAP ERP and SAP S/4HANA in the SAP GUI. So basically, first of all, you can search your transaction in the SAP menu. Here we see a nice tree structure of different folders and nodes with the ability to execute transactions. So for example, if I click on this folder, then I can see different transactions. So for example, the SBWP for the SAP Business Workplace, and with double click, then I can open this transaction and move to the SAP Business Workplace. And if I would like to search for different transactions, I can look into these folders and search for different ones. So if you're familiar with the tree structure, this is a nice way. And a nice hint on this side, if this transaction code is not shown in the menu, in the area menu, on the node, then under extras and settings, there on display technical names, you can show the transaction code. So for example, now it's not shown, but if I would click on this checkbox, then we can see that this transaction code is shown now. And the second option is, as we see now here, that you can use favorites. So for example, here I have already created 3 favorites, and if I, for example, would double click on this one, then the maintain transaction will be executed, and I can create and add new favorites if I right click on this favorites folder, and then I could, for example, insert a transaction for some structure purposes. I can also insert folders if I want to. I can also add other objects, as we've seen here, for a link to my private German speaking SAP blog, ERP app, if you want to. So for example, if I would insert a transaction here, for example, I can type in this transaction code for starting the SAP Fiori Launchpad. Keep in mind that if you are using a special namespace, we are seeing right here, UI2, then you don't have to put the prefix /n up front. So this is not needed. You can leave it like this, or for example, you can type in other transactions, for example, SE610, what you like to. But basically, as we've seen right here, then I can continue, and then this transaction has been added. In the menu bar under favorites, there you also have additional functions. So for example, you can move your favorites, you can download your whole favorites menu to your local PC, you can upload a different favorites menu from your PC. For example, if you received the favorites menu from an expert colleague, then you can reuse this knowledge and reuse his or her favorites. So, and the third option is using the command field. So we are seeing right here the command field, and in here you could also type in your transaction code. So for example, the Miro, and then you will end up in here. Keep in mind that we've seen right here, if you are in the SAP ECC Access menu, the start menu, then you directly can type in the transaction code. So for example, also the data browser SE16N. If you are already in one of those transactions and you would like to jump to a different transaction, then you have to use the prefix /n upfront. So for example, if I would like to move from the data browser to the Miro, then I have to put /n upfront and then type in Miro. Then I can move to this one. If I would like to go back, then I can again type in SE16N with prefix /n. And for example, if I wouldn't use the /n, then I can't move. So keep this in mind. If you would like to open up a transaction in a new mode, in a new window, then you have to use the prefix /o. So for example, then I can open the Miro in a different window, in a different mode. If you would like to get to know new shortcuts in the command field, I have already created one YouTube video that explains you in detail all the functionalities about this command field. But basically, if you set the focus in the command field, you can also set the focus with the key combination Control-Shift-7. So for example, here I have the focus. Now I use Control-Shift-7, then I set the focus, and then you use the F1 key on your keyboard. And then you will see a nice description of the command field and see basically the most important shortcuts and tips and tricks about the command field. But you can also use the F1 key in a different Dynpro element. So for example, in the invoice date, then you can hit the F1 key on your keyboard, and then also the documentation will open up. You can show the technical information if you want to, and so on. So keep in mind that the F1 help is one help tool. It helps you if you are at some point stuck and you don't know what, in this case, the invoice date in document is. So here you see the explanation. It specifies the issue date of the original document. And you can do this also on other elements. So for example, the company code here, head of one. Here we're seeing just a short text, but here on company code, there a link is provided. You can click on this and you will get a nice detailed explanation. So on every element, you can use the one app. If, for example, you would like to get some technical information about buttons, then you can set the focus on one button. If you click on one button, but you move up your mouse button away from this button, so you have to move your cursor away, and then you can drop your mouse button and then hit the one key. So you saw that the focus has been set to this button, and now here you see the technical information. So maybe this is also useful in your case. And what I highly recommend is use an F4 help. So for example, in this case, we see an input field for the table, and if I set focus into this input field and then hit the 4 key on my keyboard, then I can search also for different data for this input field. So for example, if I would like to search for tables that contain purchase in the description, then I can see all the tables that contain this search criteria. So it's really useful in your daily work with the SAP system. So for example, if we're moving up to the FBL1N, it's a transaction to display vendor line items, and in here you could enter the vendor account, and you can also open up the vendor ID if you're using the equal sign, and then directly type in your search term. So for example, in this case, Morto, then hit enter. And then you can see, for this case, there are no values for the selection. But what I would like to show you that directly the first selection criteria of this field in the tab is used with an wildcard search with an asterisk. So an asterisk at the last position. And you don't have to, for example, we erase this, you don't have to use the for help and then type in mortar, then asterisk. So this is faster. And for example, if there would be and result, then you will directly see the result in a nice list. You can reuse this value by double click, and if there's just one, then directly the ID of this value will be put into this info field. So this is really useful in daily work. Once you've logged into the SAP system, you will see the SAP ECC access menu, and on the right hand side the start image. If you, for some purposes, don't want to see the start image on the right side, then you can remove the start image in the settings, in the menu functions, extras and settings. And then you can select the option do not display picture, and when you've confirmed this setting, then on the right hand side we don't see the start image any longer. Keep in mind that this setting is user specific. Now I would like to show you how you can change the start image shown on the right hand side of your SAP GUI, and under extras and administration information, there you see a nice description of what you have to do in order to change the start image in the top in the right hand side of your SAP GUI. So first of all, you have to upload one specific image in the SMW0 transaction, and then you have to change in the maintenance view in a transaction code SM30 one specific database table, the SSM underscore cust. So this is what we're now doing. So first of all, we have to open up the SMW0 transaction. Then you click on the binary data for web RFC applications, and then you click on this button find, and then you can execute this search, and then you click on the create button, and then down here you have to specify an object name. So in our case, set underscore waterfall, and a short description. So for example, waterfall. Then you have to import your file with this button, and then under downloads, there I have a file. You have to confirm this. Then you have to link your object to a package if you want to. I would like to create it as a local object. And then we have uploaded our file to the SAP system. And keep in mind that your MIME type has to be created. So under settings and define MIME types, you can define a MIME type if it has not already been created. And for me, the MIME type JPEG has been already created, so image slash JPEG if you want to. So for example, you can create a MIME type with this create button. There you can specify image slash JPEG, and so for example asterisk.jpg. Then you can save your inputs. I don't do this right now because I have already created this MIME type. And then we're going one step back, and then we have to assign our file in a specific database table in the SSM_cust. So for this case, we open up the transaction code SM30, then we type in SSM_cust, we click on maintain. Keep in mind that this table is cross-client, so the changes we're doing right now affects all the clients in the SAP system. So the start image in the whole SAP system is not changed. Then I can continue, and then in start image there I paste it in, and then I save it. And you have to use a workbench request. If you have already one, then with this create request button you can create it, and then we have saved it. And once I going back to the SAP ECC Access menu, I can directly see the changes. So again, I move to the SAP ECC Access menu, and under extra settings I want to show the start image, and then here we can see directly the start image. And I got this picture from Pixabay. I will put the link in the video description if you also want to have this picture. Thank you very much for the free use. And within the SAP GUI options, you can customize your SAP GUI on your individual needs. You can open up the SAP GUI options after you have logged into your SAP system in the toolbar with this button, customize local layout, or the key combination Alt and F12, and then options. Or in the SAP Logon in the top left corner, there you can click and then you can choose options. And here you have a lot of settings you can make. So for example, you can make some settings to the visual design, your theme settings, your font settings, your branding, your custom colors, for example, for your interaction design. So if you would like to turn off your sound, if you make some change to visualization, and so on. And it is also useful to set up a start transaction. So here we see right now the start menu, the SAP ECC Access menu. And if you have set up a start transaction, then after you have logged into your SAP system, the start transaction will be executed. And for sure, you can move to another transaction with the /n prefix. And in the menu function under extras and set start transaction, there you can set up a start transaction. So for example, if you would like to set up the start transaction Miro, then you type it in, hit enter, then you have set up the start transaction. You can change it easily once again under extras and set start transaction to, for example, a different transaction. Then you have changed it, and if you would like to remove it or reset it, then once again you have to delete it, and then you have to take this over. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video and learned a lot about the SAP GUI. And hit the like button, add a comment, subscribe for free, and then see you in the next video.